I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Graham Carter. Now, if you've seen Graham's his bio, it's about a page long. And I'll tell you, when I first got this bio, Mike sent it to me, he was really excited. He said, hey, we have Graham Carter speaking at our event. And he said, here's his bio. No picture, just his bio. And I started reading it, and I gotta be honest with you, the first feeling I had was I was super envious. I was like, what the heck? This guy's he's 40 under 40, he's founded multiple businesses, he's done like literally 3 paragraphs worth of stuff, and you start to have that feeling in the pit of your gut, like, what have I done with my life? Where have I been? Have I done enough to be someone that could speak at a BAM event or be considered as successful? And so I had these feelings, and I gotta say, and I apologize for this, but I felt envious of you. I felt almost jealous of what you had accomplished. And so, you know, I mean, the highlights are that he's founded multiple companies, you know, he's top 40 under 40, his infrastructure projects, he's number 70 on Maclean's 2019 list, more and more paragraphs, I'm the best, he's the best, he did this. He started at Auckland University, but Graham grew up in a missionary family and continues to be involved with many faith-based initiatives, and he's a die-hard rugby fan and cheers for the All Blacks. But what's funny is, when Mike sent out his picture, I was like, oh, Graham Carter, I know that guy from church. That's the guy's face who I always see smiling at the events, serving and giving back. And so, as soon as I saw his face, all those feelings of envy and jealousy kind of dissipated. I'm like, that's just the really good guy that I met at church that's out there serving, trying to grow the kingdom, trying to do work to make things better for the people around him. And all of a sudden, all these accomplishments made more sense to me. Because I said to him beforehand, I didn't tell him I was going to say any of this. I said, are you okay with me not reading your bio? And he's like, yeah. He goes, that doesn't mean anything. He's like, I want to talk about totally other stuff. I was like, say what you want to say, no problem. And it just shows like the true character of Graham. When we walked in, we smiled at each other. We knew each other from church, but we know nothing about each other professionally. So his bio was unknown to me until I got it in an email. But I just want to say that Graham's been a stand-up guy since the day I met him. Always willing to give back, always willing to serve. And it's a pleasure to welcome you here to speak today.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you to everybody for braving the rain that finally arrived, the monsoon. I appreciate the introduction, and you know, for all the success I've had, there's been 25 other big, down, dark times that nobody sees, right? Everybody sees all the good stuff and not the other stuff. Look, I'm really excited to be here. I hope you guys all enjoy your lunch. And look, I'm not going to give you a typical business speech today. If you want to know about my bio, come and ask me. Happy to talk about my business. I'm in real estate development. I can talk about the market till the cows come home, about where things are going. But today, you know, I really want to share something that's on my heart that I believe God has me here to talk about today. And so I want you to listen because, yeah, it's hopefully going to inspire you, maybe challenge a few of you around what is your purpose and what are you doing with your life? Because that's a journey that I've been on over the last couple of years. So today I titled my talk, How to Finish Well. Okay, so that's the title of the talk. So the first question to pose is, you know when you're a kid and you dream about doing something, are you doing that thing now that you were doing when you were a kid? Are you a firefighter? Are you I don't know, a superstar, maybe a comedian, whatever it might be? And is anyone in here doing what they dreamed of as a kid? Yep, we got one, that's great. Yeah, okay, that's great. Well, for me, I wanted to be a travel agent, believe it or not. That was what I wanted to be. And I travel so much now that I feel like my next career, I'm going to be a travel agent. So that's what I'm going to do when I grow up. But, you know, I turned 40 a couple of years ago, and, you know, I built some businesses, won some awards, made some money, done all that fun stuff. And I got to this point with my life, I was like, what do I do with all of this? Like, what's the point of it all? Like, yeah, it's nice to have a nice car and a nice house and all that. That's all fantastic. But what is the point of it all? And so I've kind of been on this journey a little bit with myself, trying to understand what is my purpose and why am I doing what I'm doing. You know, a lot of Christian business people, they all say, well, I have a calling of God in my life, and when I get to a certain level of success, whatever that might be, I'm going to go into ministry. Okay, and that's fine. And a lot of people, they're called to be in ministry. But, you know, today I want to pose a question. What if your business is your ministry? Like, some of us are called to the kingdom and called to be in business. And so I want to tease that out a little bit. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot about my faith, my purpose, and what do I want to do, frankly, when I grow up. So you know, here's a few thoughts around that today. You know, the big idea, I guess, today is, you know, what I realized through this whole process is actually, well, in the grand scheme of things, I'm very insignificant. But, you know, I look at a verse in Matthew 22, verse 37, I realize that if I do nothing else in my life, but I love the Lord my God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, that's it. If I can get to the end of my life, and I put God first, and I have a relationship with God, I've won my race. Now, I have talents, I have gifts, and that's all really important. I've got to use those, but that's a bonus on top of being at that place when I end my life. God doesn't expect anything more of you. Like, God's put us on this planet, ultimately, me and all of you in this room, to worship Him. That's why we're here. It's not about whatever else. God doesn't need you on His program. His will be done whether we're on the bus or we're not on the bus. And so this is kind of my thought pattern that I was going through. And, you know, again, I want to use my talent, parable of the talents in the Bible, right? We want to use our talents that we have and multiply and all these great things. But at the end of the day, if I'm not putting God first in everything that I am and what I'm doing, then I'm not in the right place. So, you know, the big idea is that we have to make it to the end of the race, okay? And Paul talks about in the Bible a lot about how life is a race. And it's not just any race. Life is this is a marathon that we're in. This is not a sprint, right? You see so many entrepreneurs, so many people that go to churches, so many people in life. They come in, they're rah, 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 and after 5-6 years, they fizzle out and they disappear out of the church, out of business, out of whatever. Being an entrepreneur is tough. It's really, really tough. And so, you know, we've got to set ourselves up for the 40, 50, depending on your age, 40, 50, 60-year long haul. We're in for a long haul. So we have to put some things in our lives that gets us ready to be finishing well. We've got to think, how am I going to finish my life? I'm 42 years old. You know, I've got hopefully another 60, 70 years on this planet, depending on medicine. And if you're 40, you're not old, you're just beginning. But how do we put some things in our lives today that when we're 80, 90, 100, that we're proud of, and that we know that we're going to finish our race in a positive way? So there's another verse in Timothy, 2 Timothy 4, verse 7 and 8. And you're probably familiar with this verse, but I'll just read it out. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. There is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day. And not only to me, but to those who have loved His appearing. So that's the goal. And we all know the tragedy, right? There's how many business people, sports people, celebrities, politicians, and of course pastors, people in the church, and you know, there's redemption, but a lot of them have had amazing, spectacular falls from grace, right? There's a tombstone and there's hundreds and hundreds of people. So you start to think about, well, why did they end up in that place? They had something so amazing in their lives, and they're, you know, famous and money and fame and fortune and all that good stuff, but they don't finish well. And why is that? You know, there's a few names I'll just throw out that you guys all will be familiar with. There's Bill Hybels, Ravi Zacharias, Tiger Woods, Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew, like these guys that have done some crazy, crazy stuff. It's like, well, like, were you not self-aware? Did you not know that this is where you were heading? So, you know, so today I want to talk about 4 things that I think are really, really critical for us all to think about that help us to finish our race well. So I'm going to use the analogy of the word meat, M-E-A-T. I think there's some meat here today. And if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, I apologize in advance. I like to joke that I'm a meatitarian because I love my steak. Okay, so, you know, I'm going to talk about 4 key things using the analogy meat, M-E-A-T, just so you can remember hopefully 1 or 2 of these points. And just talk about what are 4 things that we can do in order to finish our race well. So the first one, M, stands for main thing. And whether, you know, faith-based or not, in your business and in your life and in your faith, you have to keep the main thing the main thing. Now, there's so many distractions in our lives today, especially in our world with social media and all things going on. We're busy, we've got stuff going on. But what is the main thing in your life? Now, obviously we come from a Christian worldview today, and the main thing is your relationship with Jesus. And this is something that you can say one thing, and your spouse might even say another thing, and I can't answer for anyone else other than myself. How's my relationship with the Lord? But how is your relationship with Jesus today? Like, really? Is that a focus in your life? Is that the main thing in your life? If you've heard me speak before, I have a bit of a saying that's becoming a bit of my mantra, but habits breed behaviors, and behaviors breed outcomes. So habits, behavior, outcome. So what are the habits in your life that lead to the main thing? So in a Christian context, with Jesus being the main thing in your life, how is your quiet time with Jesus every day? Are you spending 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes every day with the Lord, reading the Bible, praying? Like really? I always talk about little habits in your life: making your bed, doing a budget, tithing, exercising, eating well, all these little things, and they all kind of seem like, well, yeah, I used to make my bed in the morning, but I left home, now I don't really do it anymore. And what I've learned is that if I can do these little things, they actually start to breed behaviors in my life, and that actually leads to outcomes or fruit in my life. And each one of them on their own probably is a little bit trivial, but for me it's about having a life that's disciplined and about focused, and that focus starts in your home, in your bedroom, where there's no one else watching. So what's your discipline in your life? And again, from a Christian perspective, as keeping Jesus as the center of what we're doing. Is Jesus the main thing in your life? And is his purpose in as well? Like, I wish we all really actually wanted God's will for our lives, because that's actually really, really hard to accept, because God's will be done means that maybe we don't do what we want to do. And that's a really interesting place to be. So there's a verse in Hebrews 12, says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So how are your habits? And how are your behaviors? If you don't have the outcomes in your life, go all the way back to your habits. Every day, what are you doing every day? Okay. That's kind of a little heavy, I know. I'm sorry. But I want to challenge you and inspire you today. Okay, so M is main thing. What is the main thing in your life? Okay, the next one's a little bit more businessy, if you like. So I'm not trying to preach here, but E is about execution, right? Execution. Are you executing well? I hear so many stories about business people, and they all have an idea about a company they want to start. They want to do this, whatever. It's all a great idea. But a lot of them build a fancy business plan. Maybe they go to a business plan writing workshop, or they get some people and they put together a plan what they're going to do, and then they put that on the shelf and they forget about it. And a little bit of a story. When I started my very first company, we hired a couple of young guys with an idea, wanted to start a consulting business. We actually we made some phone calls, and we put a board of advisors that we just called up some successful people in our industry. We said, hey, would you come and mentor us and be a board of advisors? A little sidebar comment, we're in the power industry, so we actually phoned one of the former CEOs of BC Hydro, and this older guy, he's like, absolutely, I'm going to come and help you guys to, because he wanted to, give back, right? We didn't pay them. But so in Vancouver, in the village of Vancouver, you can phone anyone. So if you're in business and you need to get hold of someone, phone them. Don't be afraid. It's okay. Worst they'll do is hang up on you, right? So anyway, we had a board of advisors, and every month we'd meet with this board of advisors, and the idea was that we'd get some advice, and that'd help us with some business problems that we have so we could grow our business. So the first month we had a meeting, and we talked about what we were working on in our company and all that great stuff, and we came out with an action list of things that we should work on for the next month. Well, I'll never forget it. The next month we showed up, I was at a coffee shop, we showed up, we had our list of action items, and we, they said, oh, how did it go? And we said, oh, great, we did them all. And we had 4 guys sitting around the table with Trevor, myself, my business partner. They looked at me and said, you did what? You actually did those things? Well, yeah. We didn't know any different. He said, and they said to us, do you know how many people that we coach and we advise and we talk to? None of them actually do any of the stuff. They talk about it, they do a plan, and none of them actually execute on the plan. So in your business, are you executing your plan? Like, it's really, really easy to be distracted. Opportunities come, and there's this quandary as an entrepreneur, opportunistic versus strategic, right? You want to be strategic, and you want to be opportunistic at the same time, but are you executing your plan? If you don't execute your plan, guess what? You're never going to get to where you want to be. You know, so people might say, well, what's my purpose in life? Well, I think people get hung up on this far too often. If you're in business, if you're a husband, if you're a wife, if you're a mum or your dad, you're in business, there's your purpose right there. If you're in church, there's your purpose. You don't need any other great purpose. Just do well at that and execute that well, and then God will open doors for you. You know, the hilarious verse in the Bible, another hilarious verse, Romans 7:15. I don't really understand myself. For what I want to do, I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do the opposite, right? I do what I hate. And you know, you think about the stock market, people who have invested. Did you know over time, people actually buy shares when they're high and sell when they're low? It's a true story. And it's because people make emotional decisions and they freak out and they sell the shares. And so, you know, it's absolute opposite of what you should do. So when we execute, let's be thoughtful about where we want to go, and let's think about how do we execute, and then let's always execute to the plan and not be distracted with other things that come along. Okay, so M, main thing, keep the main thing the main thing. E, we want to execute. A is around authenticity. Be authentic, be real with yourself. Where are you actually at today? Let's not fake it, let's be real. A compliment I started getting was, oh, Graham, you're a very authentic person. I was like, well, what does that mean? So actually I did a talk, you can look it up online, a 7-minute talk about what authenticity means. The crux of the matter is you think about 2 spoons. I don't have spoons to hold up, but you think about one that's silver, real silver, and one that's silver plated, right? And the idea is that over the life of the spoon, you know, there's going to be dents, there's going to be things going to get dropped on the table and all these kinds of things. At the end of the day, you're going to be able to tell which one's silver plated because the plating's going to chip off it. Whereas the silver spoon is still a silver spoon, whether it looks pretty or it's not pretty. So the idea for us is to be authentic and be the silver spoon. You know, our world is full of fake friends and fake social media and all that kind of stuff. And I think authenticity is something that our world needs much more of, especially as Christians. We have to be authentic with who we are and what we are and why we are. And actually it goes into your companies. So there was actually a thing called a brand authenticity survey done. And you know, back in the day, back in the 90s, you know, I used to like basketball, I still love basketball, and used to want to have Air Jordans, right? And back in the day, authenticity was around, are they fake Air Jordans or are they real? And that was the thing. But now, authenticity is around values. And companies that have higher authenticity with their customers and their partners, those are the ones that are more successful, that align with the values of who you are and why you are. So let's be authentic. So you just got to keep an eye on the time here. So, M, keep the main thing the main thing. E, we want to execute. A is that we want to be authentic to who we are. T is time. So this one I struggle with to this very day. Okay? Being intentional with my time. It really grinds my gears when my staff or people around me say, oh, I don't have time for that. Because we all get 24 hours in a day, and guess what? We shouldn't work all of them either. You know, if you're working more than, sometimes you've got to push in the 12-hour days, but if you're working more than that, that's unhealthy. But, you know, being intentional, right? So I read a book, I'm sure a lot of you have read it, called Boundaries by Henry Cloud. It's okay to say no to things. It's okay. So, you know, how do we be intentional with the things that we do? Make sure we've got time for our families, working out, eating right. Again, we're in a marathon, we're not in a sprint. So we've got to make sure that we're very, very intentional with the things that we do and the things that we spend our time on. So I've struggled with this. I've got 2 active companies. I've got 2 growing kids. I've got a wife. I've got, you know, all church stuff. I've got so much stuff going on. So I'm trying to get better at actually saying no to things and saying yes to things that I think actually get me to my plan, that help me execute my plan. It says in the Bible, for where your treasure is, there your heart is also. You know, churches need us as business people. Churches need leadership. They need money. They need organizational skills. All things that as entrepreneurs and as business people that we have, right? We're not all called to be the pastor at the front of the church. A lot of us are called to be in our businesses, working as our business as our mission. Because you think about when you have staff, maybe you have 1 staff, they have a significant other, and then they have kids too. So you think about the ripple effects of how many people you impact in your business just by paying people a salary. Like, you work it out, and if you've got a company of 40 people, you're impacting hundreds of people actually at the end of the day. There's that ripple effect. So, it's really, really important that we think of our business as our mission, not mission as something we're going to do another day when we get to some kind of goal that we might have. Because God's called you to be where you are today, and what are you going to do with what you have in your hand? So really want to encourage people to think about how are you going to finish your race, and at the end, when you finish, what do you want people to say about your funeral, and how are you going to make sure you finish well in a way that is pleasing to God and honoring of the talents, the gifts, the money, the time that He's given you. That's it.
Don't go away. So we have a few minutes where we're going to allow to ask Graham some questions. So if you have a question, please put your hand up and I'll come to you. I think I'm going to start with my own first question, because your talk, it really reminded me of a Seinfeld sketch I heard like 20 years ago. Seinfeld always talked about how there was Morning Jerry and Night Jerry. And he was like, Morning Jerry has like all this, piss and vinegar, he's going to do all the things, and he's like, I'm not going to stay up late tonight, I'm not going to eat late tonight. But Night Jerry always has a different plan. And Morning Jerry hates Night Jerry. And he does this whole sketch about that. And honestly, you were talking about being, so being focused and having a plan and staying on the plan. That was really, that really reminded me of that. So with that in mind, what's one thing that you can share with us that if you could go back and talk to that 20-year-old guy that was asking for consultants and asking for help, what's one thing that you could tell that guy now as an executive who's done 20 more years?
There's a laundry list. I think actually, kind of what I talked about, keep the main thing in your life the main thing. Like, we were so focused on growing our companies and revenue growth at the lack of profitability often, but I think for me it's really about knowing your why. Why are you doing this? And it's not just about money. Like at some stages it is about the money and you want to grow and be successful and whatever, but I think for me 20 years ago, knowing my why, really having more purpose other than just building a business, I think it was really critical. And the second thing was kind of be mindful of my time. Like, I spent so many years having dinner at my office every day, working 7 days a week. My health suffers, you put on weight, you're not exercising, you're not investing in your relationships with your family. And, so many entrepreneurs or corporate office people, they have a terrible family life, right? So I think for me, I didn't quite get to that, by God's grace, didn't get down that path too far. But, I always had people that would kind of anchor me and pull me back, but being very, very intentional with where I spend my time and making sure that I do have times to be balanced and healthy in those boundaries.
Awesome. Do I look short next to him because I'm one of my bosses? Sorry. Yeah.
Graham, you're a very inspirational speaker.
Thank you.
Because you're very down to earth. And I wanted to understand some of the projects you may be doing. And second question is, I'm also a basketball fan, a sports fan in general. And how do you spend your time with other activities, for example?
Sure. Projects. So I'm in development. So we have 5 projects right now. We have two townhouse projects in the Canby corridor under construction. So we have two townhouse projects under construction along Canby corridor. And the first one, Hillcrest, will be completed by Christmas, touch wood. We're working on a 13-story concrete tower by this commercial drive SkyTrain as a rental building. And we have a 85-unit 5-story wood frame project at East Van in Kalani High School, also as a rental project. And we're just working on actually an industrial building out in Chilliwack, so we're going to get into the industrial space. So there's lots going on development. So the market for me is, my one comment I'll say is, supply is greater than demand, right? So there's a huge demand. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, great. What I do, I'm not working, busy with church, but I got 2 young girls, so I live on the North Shore, so I I've embraced the North Shore lifestyle. So I love to ski, hike, boat, paddleboard. I don't mountain bike. I tried that once and I broke my ribs, so I won't never again. But I love to get out in the outdoors and up into the mountains, and that's what I like to do.
I've just been reminded by Jen that there's tons of food left. So if you have any appetite, there's still tea and coffee, seconds, and there's dessert as well. So, but with that in mind, does anyone else have another question? Because I have one here. Okay. Did you have one?
Thanks, Graham. I was just wondering about kind of the impact of COVID connected to your thought about having a plan and execution. So I'm just keen to know, how do you know when you need to change your plan and navigate that? Yeah.
Should I be using an accent?
Yeah, it's a great accent. That's a great question, because it's a very real thing that, like, it's a black swan event, right? No one could have predicted COVID was going to be what COVID was. But actually, having a plan, I think, gives you comfort, because, again, depending on where you're at in the life cycle of your business, if you're really early days, it's very scary because you have to really change everything. But if you're at a place where you're maybe financially relatively stable and you've just got to write it out, then I think there's a little bit more opportunity to have a bigger picture. So for us, our first townhouse project called the Hillcrest, it's going to be done by Christmas. We were about to launch it to the market when the lockdown happened. Now, the good thing for us is we're a small company, and I didn't have a lot of experience in launching real estate projects to the market. It was my first, big one that we were doing. So we were able to just, be entrepreneurial. We pivoted. Like, we had to change. We did virtual appointments for people. We did a whole bunch of 3D renderings. People could use the website to look at it rather than coming to a sales center. And I think it's just about, again, if you know your why and you're relatively financially stable, I think it's about having that vision and a bigger picture in play. But it's very uncomfortable. It was tough. I don't know if I should say this, but I will. I was actually looking at buying a sports car, and I did a test drive, and the guy came to my house because COVID, right? And you got to put the gloves on, and you got to sanitize the steering wheel when you drive it, and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, I really shouldn't buy this now because I don't know what's going to happen, right? And so I didn't buy it, and I wish I had now because the market went crazy. I would have made a ton of money. But I guess it's practical, smart decisions, right? You just make little decisions as you go every day, thinking about what's the right thing to do right now. I think is the only way you can navigate, because no one has any idea. And again, I always say, Christians, we have an unfair advantage. We have the Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit gives you that still small voice. You ask the Lord, God, guide me. I need your help right now. And so everyone in this room, you guys are already, you're a mile ahead already of everybody else in the world because you have an unfair advantage. So make sure you use it.
Thank you so much. It's really inspiring. I just have a question. Like, when you talk about authenticity, being authentic, and we're in the middle of sitting at a table and doing business, can you give us an example of you being authentic with your partners or people you collaborate? Or are you, yeah.
Am I authentic?
And what kind of car was it also?
It was a blue 911 convertible. I since got one, and they're amazing. Example of being authentic. I think it's honestly, it's just about every day being real with yourself. And like, I have staff, right? In my one company, we got about 50 people, and the other company, we got about 50. So I got about, I don't know, 65, 70 staff across my two companies right now. Like, I'll talk to anyone and talk, like, on the weekend, what do you do? Well, I went to church and did this and this and this. People want to do business with people, right? So they don't want to do people with they don't want to do business with the image of a salesperson with a brown suit with this briefcase walking around trying to sell their wares. So in business and in partnerships, people want to be real with people and do business with people that are real. So for me, it's about being myself. I don't come from money. I come from a missionary family, right? My dad's a teacher, my mum's an accountant, and so that's who I am, and that's okay. I don't need to sell myself to be something that I'm not. This is who I am. This is what we're doing. This is the journey we're on, and would you like to be a part of my journey? I say that to my customers and my staff and my business partners. So I think it's really about just understanding, again, what's your journey, where are you going, and sales is about finding a fit between what you have and what the customer needs. If there's not a fit, tell them, I can't help you. Maybe I can refer you to somebody. So it's all about value creation by being real and trying to help somebody. And it comes down to being a servant. Like in Christ is a great example of a servant. How can I serve my customers? How can I serve my staff? How can I serve the people around me?
So government is a big business, really, when you come down to it. If you were running the country or the province, what changes would you make to make it more efficient?
C2, C4, or GTS?
I'll take you for a drive later, does it? It's not about the car. If I was in government, what would I do to change? Oh, gee. Well, I'm going to go on about real estate. I'd make planning in half the time that it takes. Because for me to do a development in Vancouver takes 4 years. 2 years of planning and 2 years of construction. The planning's already being done. There's already a community plan put up by the city. And it shouldn't take 2 years to get a building permit. It's crazy. And that just adds cost, right? So I think Rennie did a study, and 37% of the cost of a new home is taxes, fees, and time. And all developers, we're all aligned. If we, the only person who makes money out of that is banks, because they've got to pay interest. But you think you spend $30 million on a piece of land, you think about the interest costs over 4 years, what that adds to your project. So for me, that's completely inefficient, and it completely throws supply, and buyers and developers, we're in the same boat. We both agree that it should be, you could $1 million condo becomes a $700,000 condo right away. And maybe that's the way to get affordability, right? So because I'm in that industry, that would be one thing that's important. But, government is a big business, and, I think a lot of people get into government to do the right thing, but it's a very hard system to change. So once you get in there, it's difficult.
Do you have any advice for nonprofits?
Oh, yeah.
You got 2 minutes.
Think like a for-profit business. Run your business like a business. It's not like, non-profits are non-profit from a financial perspective, but they profit every other way. And I am very passionate about help non-profits thinking like business people, and I understand it's not all metrics. There's different metrics and KPIs that you use, but we have to have business thinking in non-profits, because that's the way to scale, to grow, to have a bigger impact.
One last question over here.
Yeah, you were talking about keeping the main thing the main thing. So I'm curious about, if you don't mind sharing, what do you do to get to know Jesus better? This past Sunday, the pastor was talking about getting to know Jesus, and that's really stuck in my head. And so I love all the business things that you're offering, but particularly curious about the spiritual, and also I'm a social justice land developer. I'd love to talk to you further about that with you.
Sure. Okay, well, here's what I do. Spend time with the Lord every day. Make sure in the morning I'm reading my Bible and spending time praying. I'm involved. I think actually serving is a really big part of it. In my church, I serve, like Sam was talking about. We run a home group. So those kinds of things. I think sometimes you don't feel like it, but you do it because you should, kind of a little bit. But I think that's okay that you do those things. I think having people in your life that can speak into your life at a very raw level, that can straighten you out when I need straightening out. In business, you can make money and it really can screw you. Money is neutral, but money can take you one way or the other. And having success is great, but you got to keep your heart right. So for me, I spend time with the Lord. I've got a close network of people that I can confide in. I'm involved in a Christian business entrepreneur peer group, which I think is really important. Again, I try to have people speaking in my life that have the faith that I want. So for me, who do I have in my life that's the faith that I want? And that's who I try and spend time with. I think for me, I grew up in the 90s. I love hip hop music, and I have two girls now. I can't listen to hip hop anymore because it's crazy, right? Like the videos and so I listen to Christian hip hop now, and it's unbelievable. There's some amazing R&B and hip hop Christian music. And so, but for me, it's about that mindset that I want to immerse myself in the Lord every day, whether it's worship music in the car, I got my KB or my Lecrae on the radio, but really just zoning out in the Lord and trying to be present every day with the Lord. That's for me how I try to keep myself focused, I guess. So I don't know if that answers the question, but a couple things.
Amazing. Thank you, Graham, so much for being here today. Can we give him a round of applause?